When you see a mom cry tears of, I don't know what to do, I love my son, but I can't have him in my home. It's the most devastating thing to see.
I'm here today with Dallas Block, and Dallas runs a ministry for young men to help them in a variety of ways, which we're going to talk to, and he is passionate about seeing young people grow and families engage, and he's told me some great stories about his kids and some things. So we're going to have a conversation and we'll see where it goes, but I am excited to be sitting down here with Dallas. Dallas, why don't you just kind of overview us quickly what your ministry is and kind of what you guys do?
Yeah, Rock Solid Refuge is a ministry to 13 to 18-year-old teen boys. We have a 12-month residential treatment program. We're in the southwest of Saskatchewan, and we serve young people and families from all across Canada. So we really work with young people that are in really significant crisis. So substance abuse and addictions, pornography addictions, challenging behavior, suicidal ideation and depression and self-harm. Those things have really just exploded in our culture recently, but they're not new things either. And as we see some of the trends in our culture, even the legalization of marijuana a number of years ago has just continued to normalize those realities as valid ways of dealing with life. And young people are particularly susceptible to self-medicating and going down that path, but they're also significantly susceptible to addictions. And a lot of the adults that you might come across that have significant substance addictions, most of them will tell you that their issues and their struggles started when they were teenagers. And so our heart is to reach into that age group before it's become to that extent, and at the very least sow some seeds of hope for the future, both for them and for their families, and at best just see an absolute transformation, which we've had the privilege of seeing many times as well.
Well, thank you for doing that, because it is so needed. And you are working only with boys.
That's right.
Young men. I don't know when they become.
At least at this time, yeah.
Right, sure. And I've heard the term there is a pandemic of fatherlessness in society. I'm sure you have experienced that. And what does the role of a father mean to a young boy and a young man?
Yeah, the absence of that role really creates a lostness for a young man. What is the direction that their life is to take as a young man? And the same could be said for young ladies as well. Our work is more with young men. But just the reality that a stable man in the home creates direction and like a compass point for the home. And good for the moms who do what they need to do, and single moms that fill in the gaps as best as they know how.
Yes.
But we do live in a time where there is so much absentee fathers, and so my heart is to see fathers re-engage, but also just to see this generation realize that they have a future role to play. And it's really interesting because regardless of what our students' backgrounds have been, and most of them from some kind of brokenness in some fashion or another, some of it very directly broken, others stemming back to being adopted and the brokenness from there, even if they're adopted into a really solid home, that brokenness seems to carry forward for them, at least the students that we work with. But to give them a vision of the future and what God has in mind for them is so important for them to see. And it is interesting that, again, regardless of their background and the struggles that they've been in, most of our students will still say, like, if I ask them, hey, what do you want life to be when you're 30 years old? What do you think that should look like? And most of them will say, you know what? Probably should be married, maybe even a kid or two, maybe have a house, a good job, and they will describe.
So they want that, like that is, even though they haven't come from a scenario like that.
Yeah,
there's a
longing for that. There's a longing for that stability, and so then we begin to frame and say, so if things don't change, if things just kind of stay the way they are, if you keep doing the things that you're doing, how likely is that to happen? How likely is that outcome? And they can sometimes get really despondent and realize it's not going to happen. That's not going to happen. And so then, okay, so can we set a different course? Can we try to set a trajectory that's different so that we can aim for those things?
That is great, that you give them a future vision of, the life that could be. But if you stay on the same track that you're on, that's not going to happen. And they wake up to that message, it sounds like.
Yeah. Which is a process, though, because
Right.
they are very caught up in, what is it that I want today? What is it that I want today?
Right.
One of our current students right now, he's been with us, since the fall. We're a 12-month program, so it's this fairly long program, at least it seems. But but it's taken us 4 months for us to get him to the place where he's actually verbalizing, drugs is stupid. It's like, Yeah, it is.
After 4 months.
And to actually begin to verbalize a very different positive future than really what he grew up in, but what he probably felt just kind of trapped in. This is just what's going to happen, right? And to give him that vision and to hear him begin to verbalize some of that is really quite incredible.
So where do these problems start? Or you mentioned a minute ago about going all the way back to Genesis. Where are you going with that?
Yeah. I do believe that both as individuals, as families, and as societies, we need a foundation in our lives.
Right.
And so as a Christian, I really do believe that God's foundations for us, and they're multiple, they go back to Genesis and God's created order. I like this statement that I heard once, particularly about the family, that the family is actually pre-political. So a lot of times we get really wrapped up in what's happening in politics in our world. And it's not that it's not important, because it really is important. It really makes a difference in our societies, what's happening in politics. But when we recognize that at the foundation, at the creation of the world, God created family before he created societal order. That the family order, the family structure, is actually the cornerstone and the foundation for healthy society. And in that created order, God said to Adam and Eve, he placed them in the garden, and he said, work it and keep it. And essentially, I believe that what God did for Adam and Eve is by placing them in the garden, he gave them a prototype or an example of what they were to do in their assignment together with the world. So it's a big world. I've given you this little spot. Now go out and make the world flourish like this, right? So when we understand that we have this assignment from God to for our lives to be that kind of a blessing, that we're to, as men particularly, we're to lead the charge in domesticating the world, to bringing order, God's order, into the world, that our lives become a blessing. And so some of the basic principles we work with our students are maturity, responsibility, charity. That's kind of our goals for them, right? And it kind of comes out of a passage in Ephesians where Paul writes, let the thief no longer steal, but let him do honest work with his hands so that he might have something to share with those in need, right? So there's kind of this progression, right? But it's this reality that the young people that we work with as teenagers, they're in a time of their life when they should be starting to significantly transition into their lives being a blessing. But because their lives are in such chaos and crisis, their lives are still just, they're taking. They're really, in a sense, stealing from society one way or the other.
Right.
Stealing from their parents. And so we want to take that reality and go, okay, we're going to work maturity, responsibility, and charity in your life. We want you to stop stealing. Okay, your life has been taking from everyone around you. So we got to stop doing that. We're going to encourage you to take personal responsibility. So it's time to get up at 7:30 in the morning. That's not too early. It's you know what? It's breakfast, and we're going to eat a healthy breakfast. We're going to eat healthy meals. This is responsible. We're going to do chores. You're going to take care of the space that you live in and the space that you share with each other. We're going to do some worship together. We're going to turn our hearts every day to the God that we believe created the world. We're going to do school, and we're going to exercise our minds, and we're going to take responsibility for that gift that God has given to us. We're going to have fun. We're going to play games. One of my favorite games is actually pickleball. I love playing. I mean, these kids come in and most of them haven't played it, but they pick it up fast. And their goal becomes, I got to beat Dallas. That's who I got to beat. And it's just fun, right? And so we play games with them. We enjoy the world that God has given us with them. We begin to help them to see that their lives can be a blessing, that a mature and responsible approach to life can then work itself forward into a charitable approach to life, and that's not a common term anymore. But basically what we mean by
term charitable approach.
Yeah.
Okay.
That charity is, in some senses it can be interpreted love, but I think it's bigger than that. It's this our lives are a blessing. We do things with our lives that benefit. So again, that verse, let him do honest work with his hands so that he might have something to share with those in need. So it's this complete transition from one spectrum to another.
Right.
And then as we lead them into some of those opportunities, and they get to experience some of those things, and some of our guys or our students went into town and shoveled snow the other day. And so they're working away and doing this. I had a couple of them complain or whatever, like that's teenagers, right?
That's right.
But at the end of the day, they got to experience the blessing of being a blessing, the blessing of helping others that have a need. And so that's core to that principle that God has given us right from the Garden of Eden, that our lives are to move out and change the world and make the world a place that flourishes more under God's good design.
I just read a quote from Aristotle, I think it was, and he said, the way society flows is from the family into the smaller communities or churches, and then out into the culture and into the world. Exactly what you're just saying. Like, the foundation is that family. And what I loved about what you said is the redemptive quality of that's what the gospel is about.
Yeah, absolutely.
These boys are going from being a leech to society and taking to now giving and contributing. Yeah. And it's so beautiful to see, thank you for doing that. And okay, so how did you get started in this, and what's kind of your story not everyone is running a home for tough kids.
Very true, very true. And in fact, in Canada here, we're very rare, an organization like this, particularly to teenagers. So my wife and I were married when we were fairly young. I was 20, she was 21. And it wasn't long after we got married that God just seemed to move us into being a part of youth group ministry. So we were volunteers at the church that we were a part of back then, and we found we just really enjoyed it. We really enjoyed being in young people's lives, calling them on the phone, being at Bible study with them, being at youth group activities with them, and just being a part of their lives, not realizing that would become really a life calling for us to be in young people's lives. And so as the years went on, God just seemed to make that calling to young people more and more distinct. And at a certain point, I took on a full-time youth pastor position in Southwest Saskatchewan. And while I was in that church, some family friends of mine that I had grown up with many years before were in the area, and a single mom that I had known from years back, her son, and she had raised him in the church. This was a really solid kid. Like this was like best case scenario, even for a single mom home. He was really involved in the church. He was around really healthy adults and people, and things were good. Like, there was no indication that things were coming off the rails. But there was a time when somebody shared a marijuana joint with him, and that experience was so good that to him in that moment, just normal teenage struggles and depression but not off the rails stuff. But that one experience led him to 6 months later be a full-blown crystal meth addict. And if you've never seen somebody trapped in an addiction like that, it's the most bizarre thing you can ever experience and witness. And so I had never been close up.
In 6 months, that's what you said.
Yeah, 6 months from one joint to crystal meth addict. And I had never been so up close to addictions like that. As he began to come out of that addiction a few years later, he'd been clean for a few months, and we're sitting around the table, our kitchen table, talking, and I'm trying to understand this. And I said, if that drug was here on the table, your mom's here, your uncle and aunt who have been walking this journey with you, so you got your family here, but that drug, if it's here on the table, what are you going to choose? Are you going to choose that drug, or are you going to choose your family? Help me understand. He says, I hate the answer that I know is true. I'd still take that drug. And so he understood the depths of the addiction that he was still caught in. And that young man, through the process of the three-ish years, he had heart failure twice. He thought he was going to die. And so he had overdosed twice without dying. He had multiple times he was in jail, short-term rehabilitation programs, government programs, and so on. And not until he got into a year-long Christian-based program was he able to really come out of it. And so during that process, we got together at one point, and actually it was his idea first, I think, and then the family, and they came to us and said, we really think we should start an adolescent program, and would you be a part of that with us? And so we just, we didn't know any better than to just try it. And so we just started walking it forward. We gathered other people around us that had a similar passion, and that was in January of 2005. And so 19 years later, we've been doing it for 17 years, and I mean this summer it'll be 14 years full time year round. Okay. And we've had over 160 kids that have kind of come through our doors. Wow. And so that was kind of the journey for us to step into this kind of thing. It wasn't because we all had this great education that we felt we had what it took to do this. Right. But the need became the call, and people came around and said, yeah, let's see if we can do this.
Okay, I wanted to ask you about a couple things here. The need became the call. That's a great phrase. So a friend of mine just did a teaching session for landscape companies around landscape design and sales. But he was interacting with a dozen landscape companies, and drug use comes up because these landscapers are hiring high school students or guys out of high school, and they're like, marijuana and drug use is a major problem. And I would think probably construction and roofing, all those sorts of industries. Yeah. And you talked about marijuana, which is being legalized in Canada, and I don't know if it is in the States yet or not, or I think in some states.
Most of the states it is, I think.
So tell me about, is there a solution to this? What are people supposed to do? What are parents supposed to do? What are business owners supposed to do? What is the secret sauce, Dallas, to fix the problem?
Yeah. I mean, we can never abandon the foundation of the family being the ultimate solution. So as the craziness spreads out there has to be a groundswell of those who believe that we've got to get it right in our homes and in our churches and in our communities, and getting people to band together to say, no, that's not normal. That shouldn't be the way it is. We need a different vision for our young people than that. And so if there is a secret sauce, it's somehow giving our young people a vision for their lives and for the future and for the impact that their lives are meant to have. That's more than what do I get out of this life, or out of this moment, or out of this job, right? And sometimes it's even as basic as, okay, so you're involved in landscaping company stuff, right? Well, why should we do landscaping? What's the point of that? well, we create something that looks better. You know what? Actually, that's actually creating flourishing. There's actually something that's consistent with God's creational order to that. Like, can we even give them a vision of the beauty of that?
Right.
That is more than just, hey, do this so that you get a paycheck.
Right.
Right. I worked at a sawmill for a number of years, and actually, I really believed that I needed to go there with the attitude that I'm here to be a blessing. Not just to get a paycheck. I'm here to help this company make money because that's why they hired me. But I also have the opportunity to be a part of producing something that's getting shipped all around the world, giving housing to people.
It's going to be beautiful,
right?
right.
And so I do think we have to reframe a vision for why we're in this world for our young people and for our society and for our churches, rather than, and even for the jobs that we hire people for. Hey, yeah, if you work and you do this job, you'll get this pay. But if we can begin to reframe and help people see a much greater vision than that, I think that's what we're really called to in this world.
One of my mentors, we had a conversation once, or I think it was maybe in a class, he said, people want to be connected with something bigger than themselves.
Yeah.
And that's what you're talking about, You're not just digging a hole for a plant or cutting a piece of wood for something. This is bigger than you, and this is a bigger thing. But then not only the big, it comes down to the small. When you said you have the guys getting up in the morning and like making their beds. I don't know if you said make their beds, but I think Jordan Peterson says something like make your bed. Like, it starts with getting up at 7:30, not sleeping until 10:30.
Yep.
And so how do the little decisions and little choices translate to life change?
Yeah. I remember one of our previous students, he finished their program, he went back home, and I was able to visit him in his community, and we got chatting, and he just told me about going back home and then kind of slipping back into old patterns and things like that, and how that actually was really unhealthy for him. And he said,
to go back, so from out of this bubble
because everything is directed, right? At Rock Solid, here's your schedule. Like, it's all kind of directed. So now how do we translate that, or how does this young man translate that into being a healthy young man back home? And it was really interesting that, he kind of slipped back into old patterns, and then he realized, wait a minute, I'm not doing real well like this. And he actually reinstituted some of the exact same schedules and activities that we had done at Rock Solid Refuge with him. Everything from getting up at a decent time to working out and getting some exercise and just having some routines that are just simply healthy, that were a part of shifting him back into a healthy trajectory.
That's so good. That's such a great story that illustrates it so perfectly.
Yeah.
Thank you. So if I'm a dad, I'm a parent, a mom, I'm starting to see bad things in my young person and the trajectory is going in the wrong direction. What do I do? What can I do? There's probably not a silver bullet, but
yeah. Some of the principles that we work with at Rock Solid that we believe are just also good home and parent principles are three primary tools that God's given us to work with our kids is role modeling, relational influence, and authority. Authority can be as simple as here's the home that you live in. So for us, it's here's the program that you've come to, but here's the home that you live in. These are our basic cultural realities, our structures, our expectations. And if you make choices that are like this, then here's those outcomes. And if you make choices that are like this, here's the outcomes of that, whether it's consequence-based or whatever the case is. And so that's normal. And that even framing the reality of authority in that word in the context of a blessing, right? So Jesus said, all authority in heaven and on earth has been given unto me. Now go and make disciples, right? And so if Jesus' authority is just simply this angry hammer, well, is that what it is? No, actually, Jesus' authority is actually the greatest blessing that we could ever have. So when we have, as a parent, have authority in our kids' lives, we need to always constantly view that God has given that to us for a blessing for them. It's not a hammer, although at times we use it to steer and even to steer very directly and very intentionally. But it's not a hammer, it's a tool for their blessing. Role modeling, our kids follow what we do. My boys are adults, and they have a daily practice of getting up early in the morning and having a morning routine that, as it turns out, is somewhat similar to mine. Because my morning routine was never a secret.
Right.
And my time with God every morning is consistent because I desperately need it. And I want my kids to know that that's a desperate need that they have as well. And I need to role model that. I can't just tell them that, okay, here it is, I'm putting it in front of you, now do it. No, it's necessary for me to role model that so that they can follow in my footsteps. And the third one is relational influence.
Okay, so the first one was role modeling.
Role modeling, relational influence, and authority.
Authority, okay.
Yeah. So relational influence is really this understanding that at some point they're going to be outside of our authority, one way or the other, right? Will we still have some relational influence in their life at that time? But as they grow, like when they're really little, we have all authority and almost no relationship, right? And so, but that begins to flip over the years, where we should have to exercise authority less and be able to speak into their lives more so that their ear is open to us. But that comes because there's a relationship where there's a knowledge that I really care for you. There's nothing I want besides your good. And it's everything from warm interactions, morning greetings. I do this whole seminar on Hold On to Your Kids based on a book by Gordon Neufeld. But
yes, is that the title of the book? I was in that seminar.
Hold On to Your Kids.
Hold On to Your Kids, okay.
Yeah, and the principles in there are really important, that parents need to matter more than peers. A part of kind of watching our teens maybe slip away from us a bit is this transition that starts to happen where they see their peers as primary instead of us, and we need to be able to continue that time of influence. We need to compete in some senses with their orientation towards their peers versus us, and bring them back in. We need to gather them, and we need to do everything we can to relate well and have a warm relationship, and a relationship where their ear is open to us. There's often struggles in those teen years, one way or the other, but they should never question whether we love them. They should never question whether we're going to be there for them. Not to enable them, not to kind of keep paying their dysfunction, right? Because a part of that principle is that they gotta also own the pain of their decisions too, and that's a part of the teen progress too. If we pick up the pain for every choice that they make, then that's called enabling. And so we can love and relate well and have a good relationship without enabling. And that's a fine line, and it's a tough one.
Well, I think you were telling me yesterday about a mom that something like she knew her son needed help and had to leave her home, but she didn't want that tension and that struggle that I can't help him here, or whatever the scenario is.
Yeah. And when you see a mom cry tears of I don't know what to do. I love my son, but I can't have him in my home. It's the most devastating thing to see, and so we want to see that turn around. We want to see that young man value his mom, value those relationships, and recognize that those relationships are a gift, and that those peer relationships, actually, those aren't going to be the ones that last. Very hard for a young person to often believe that and see that, but we need to walk that forward, believing that, and now, us having adult kids, it's very interesting to watch that, because they still have friends from their teen years and different things like that they get together with and stuff. But we do family dinner every Sunday evening, and just the richness that those family relationships are actually really primary to them, really important to them, is a pretty sweet thing.
Someone told me around when I was getting married, like, the guys you have in your wedding party, it's like, have family in your wedding party is basically what they said, because they're your best buddies right now. But as time goes on, people move, the friendships drift away. And, you know, I had some friends in my wedding party. One, I haven't talked to him in 10 years probably. My brother was in my wedding party. I talk to my brother all the time, right?
Yep, absolutely.
That's interesting that your peers will distribute or will whatever, but your family, hopefully your family continues to stay strong. What is the importance of marriage? You've mentioned moms, you've mentioned dads. You're seeing worst case scenarios a lot of times. How do marriages affect the outcomes of youth?
Yeah, hugely. So many young people or adults caught in addictions will point back to a catastrophic moment in their families when they were young as the beginning of a struggle. I don't know how many testimonies I've heard of adult addicts who will say, well, my parents divorced when I was a teenager. That's when things began to come off the rails.
That was the thing.
And so that nucleus of the marriage becomes the anchor for the home. When our older kids were young, we took a course and then we were facilitators for this study called Growing Kids God's Way. And one of the sessions was specifically on the centrality of the husband-wife relationship and the importance of the kids seeing that mom and dad's relationship is actually more important than the relationship between mom and kid or dad and kid. And I just remember one mom in that in the one session, the one group that we led, she lost it. She was just actually quite upset. She's like, no, my kids are number one.
Wow.
And then she came back a week later, having gone through the homework and stuff, and then she said, I get it. I understand. Me and my husband, we have to be the most important relationship in the home. And so, you know, some basic principles of, do your kids see you just sit together, spend time together? Do you allow your kids to take your attention before your spouse has your attention, even coming into the home, right? And
who do you kiss first?
And so I found that to be a very interesting principle, right? Where it's like you walk in the door, and this is what they kind of talked about, but you just figure out how to do the principle, right? You walk in the door, and the first person that you greet is actually your wife or the spouse. And you spend some time, and if the kids want to interrupt, you just say, no, this is our time. But one way or the other, finding a way where there is that time together that the kids recognize, mom and dad are together. And that relationship is priority. And as much as they will try to interrupt and they think that they have something so important, the stability that comes into their lives actually when that relationship is very evidently a priority is actually significant. And kids can go through a lot of challenging circumstances when that anchor is stable in their lives.
I've been reading and researching a lot about pornography addiction, and one of the things that comes up over and over as like the number one factor is the strength of, or being in a two-parent mom and dad home is like a major factor in whether boys or girls get addicted to pornography. My dad, when he's had people ask him for like marriage or family advice or how do you raise great kids, and he's like, your kids need to know that you love their mom. And he's like, I love my wife. My friend says if there's my kid or my wife is hanging off the cliff, he's like, sorry, I'm getting your mom first. Like, I love your mom. Your mom is my priority. So you said a word there. You said nucleus, but it reminded me of something I heard you say the other day about the nuclear family versus the natural family. I think those were the terms you used.
Yeah.
And I thought that was fascinating. What do you mean by the nuclear family versus the natural family?
Yeah, my understanding is this term nuclear family came in maybe the 50s or 60s, you know, post-Second World War. Mom, dad, a couple of kids or a few kids, and really they're transportable anywhere in the country, and they kind of set up and they're their thing. The natural family actually understands the need for that family to have extended family. Sometimes it's not possible for it to be blood relatives.
Okay.
But a lot of times it actually is.
Right.
And you know, I think unfortunately, how many people have seen themselves as a nuclear family and not embraced the broader natural families of uncles and aunts, and particularly grandparents, and that reality that's around them. And for those of us who have some of those extended families, like when we come, you know, when I come into the home of a relative, whether it's one of my siblings or, you know, their kids and grandkids are around or whatever, you know, greeting their kids and greeting their grandkids and showing a reality of importance to this extended, broader community of family is really important. When it's not possible to be around that extended biological family, extending your family through means of church and small group fellowships, and I mean, in this conference, it's the homeschool thing, right?
Sure.
So homeschool co-ops or whatever, but finding ways for like-minded, like-valued families to relate and be a nurturing community to our kids, right? Yes. And so even when it can't be biological, for there to be a nurturing adult community around our kids that can be a part of, and for us to be a part of that for other people as well, is I think a part of God's broader design for us as well.
And I think we've gotten away from that. I was talking to a fellow from Somalia at a Tim Hortons a few weeks ago, and I forget how it came up, but he's like, we don't have retirement homes. Like, our job as my parents get old, as the son, my role is to now look after my parents. Yeah. And in our culture, we have, not everyone, but like kind of pushed that responsibility off to paying a business to do it, or a government organization or something. Yeah. And I think that's a broken thing in our system of multi-generational knowledge being passed. You mentioned grandparents to grandkids and stuff, and it's a chink in our armor, I think, in the family, in the natural family. I just love that.
Yeah. Convenience over calling, right? Like over what should be better.
Mm-hmm. No, that's good. Okay, so what if you're a single mom or a single dad? What if you're not connected to a bigger family? Like, lots of people are not in these best case scenarios. Yeah. What is the hope? What is how can they, you've touched on a couple things, but what does that look like?
Well, I think the first thing is for that single parent to have the kind of relationship with God, first of all, that is kind of like what that spouse would be, right? Where the kids actually realize that the number one relationship for that single parent is actually God, and that they are a priority as their child because God's a priority, and their priority flows second to God being a priority. And then moving forward from that, being a part of, again, a larger community. And so even though, you know, that young man I described earlier that got off the rails into a crystal meth addict, to being a crystal meth addict, and you know, we would hope to prevent that, but at times there's your reality. Okay, right. Here now you're there. Yep. Right. So now what? But to see even in that broken reality of what it became, the community of Christians and believers just surround them for years. All the 3 or more years that it took to walk that journey forward for him, and that young man, like, this is 20 years later now, that young man is solid. Wow. He has a family of his own, 3 kids, a wife. I believe he's a journeyman electrician. He's really involved in his church. Like, this guy is solid. But part of that process was Mom kept him as much as she could around and getting around those who would lead and guide him alongside of her. She didn't take that burden on all by herself. She allowed others.
She was a single mom?
She was a single mom. And
That's so
and
great.
so and so we should never feel hopeless just because that's the scenario a person finds themselves in. But also don't isolate. You can't isolate. There's no way you're coming out of this through isolation.
On your own. That's good. Okay, so what role do churches play in this? You've talked about community a few times. Is there, how can churches support families with young people that are going into this world? If they're not going to come to your program,
Yeah.
what can we do as a community, as that natural family, to help those in our community?
Yeah, I mean, I really believe that young people need to be shepherded, right? And so, yes, parents are primary, but going through the teen years, again, that their world expands, their relationships expand, and so the need for there to be nurturing adult relationships that will affirm the good things that are already happening in the home is absolutely critical. So I was a youth pastor for quite a few years, and I would often say that a lot of times the best I could offer was to be a partner and come alongside the family to affirm the good things that are already happening in the home. And there were some situations that, I mean, as a youth group, we were able to reach into some kids' lives that were not from a Christian home and draw them into this circle.
Yes.
And it's a beautiful, beautiful thing, right? But there's also this reality that, and one scenario sticks out to me in particular, and it really kept me grounded in this reality. And so this young man had been in the youth group that I led for a number of years. He finishes high school, goes to Bible college for a year, and then he heads off to university. And he's 20-ish or something like that. And he comes back home, and we're hanging out. We're doing some project together, working on the youth drop-in center a little bit in off hours or whatever. We're working together, and we sit down and we're just chatting.
Yeah.
And he thanked me for my influence in his life. And I was puzzled by it because you know what? He never seemed like somebody who needed me. He never seemed like somebody who was potentially at risk or in a potentially difficult situation. And he just said, I actually struggled a lot. I just didn't really let anybody know. But you were one of the people that were in my life that was kind of an anchor, kind of that place and that person that gave direction and help. And I thought, that is actually what our young people need. We shouldn't look around and go, oh, that one's got it together, that one's got it together.
Right.
Oh, we better help this one over here. But rather actually recognize that all of our young people need shepherding. They need other nurturing adult relationships to come alongside of them and encourage them, give them a hope and a vision for the future. Even if they seem like they've got it together,
right.
You know what? Young people are all insecure. I believe that that's true. There's very few that aren't. And so let's walk alongside them and let's encourage them because they all need it.
What's so great about that is that, you're not a psychologist or I don't think you are,
No,
a psychiatrist or, it's something any of us can do.
Any of us
can sit down with pat a kid on the shoulder at church on Sunday or when you're at hockey or at soccer practice and say, hey, good job, or like, what's going on in your life? And you've got what it takes, and encourage them.
Yeah.
It's so simple.
Yeah.
It's not rocket science. It's not 8 years of university.
Yeah.
It's men and women taking an interest.
Yeah.
It's so actionable and so.
Yeah. Absolutely.
That's golden, man. That's great.
Yeah.
Is there anything you want to share before we wrap up here? Like, you've seen lots of things. What's on your heart?
I would wrap up with this. So we've talked about a lot of practical things, right? And so it can seem like here's a formula: do these things and better outcomes. And that's kind of Proverbs living. It's really good. It's important, right? And all of what we've talked about, I believe very deeply in. I believe in those foundations. I believe in those principles. But we also live in a really broken, sin-cursed world, and I'm part of that problem. My sin is part of that problem. And in my own life, I had to come to a place where I recognized that my sin I needed a savior because of my sin. And that in my brokenness, that Christ had died, actually, to pay the penalty for my sin. And so my hope for the future isn't first and foremost on that God's given us a mandate to fulfill, but actually that I've already screwed that up. And I've actually screwed it up pretty bad. And Christ has come to pay both the penalty for that, but also to empower me to new life. And that my prayer that as this conversation wraps up, that the first foundation is actually because we're broken, because the world is broken, because it's sin that's at the root of that, that we would recognize that God has sent a Savior to deal with the sin. And he did it on the cross. His death and his resurrection. And by my willingness to offer myself essentially like the prodigal son as a slave, recognizing and embracing his forgiveness, he embraces me as a son, and he empowers me to the life that he has called me to. And so I don't do what I do out of my own energy. Every day I wake up recognizing I can't do what you've put before me today unless you give me the strength to do it. And that is so key also in the hope that we have to offer, whether it's our young people or our old people.
Right.
That God gives us the power and the strength to do what he calls us to.
Great. You're a charity.
We are.
You raise funds to run your ministry.
We do. Yeah.
If people wanted to support your ministry or find out about your ministry, where do they go to get all your info?
rocksolidrefuge.com.
Okay.
So, yeah, really simple website address, rocksolidrefuge.com, and you can surf around there. There's lots of donate buttons on there. So we really need the partnership of many people to help us do this. It is really expensive to do, but we really believe that these young people and these families should have an opportunity for some change.
Great. We'll put a link in the description, so if you want to support the great ministry that Dallas and his team are doing to make a difference in young people's lives, I would encourage you to do that. They're doing great things. Thank you for your time. You've taught a bunch of workshops at this conference we're at, and they have been great. I was at one of them, and it was fabulous. Thank you for your work in young people, and keep it up, man.
All right. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate this opportunity.
I just had a great conversation with Dallas Block. He's making a difference in young people's lives. There were some great takeaways there for moms and dads, for churches. Get involved in young people's lives, pat them on the shoulder, encourage the good things. You don't know, even if everything looks great on the outside, they could be struggling with something, and you as an adult, a loving, caring adult, can make a difference. This was a great interview. If you want to share it with someone else, there were some good nuggets in there. Thanks for joining us on this episode. Please like and subscribe. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify, you can rate and review and do all those things that you have to do. We appreciate it so much as we cultivate wisdom from mistakes